considered as one of the most genre-defining shooters and one of the best movie-to-game adaptations ever, Goldeneye 64, a game that set the standards for how shooters should have a place on consoles and still carries a strong legacy to date. But back in its heyday, gaming rumors were a very common breeding ground, most popularly at recess, where kids may have discussed rumors such as getting Mew in Pokemon, and sometimes on the internet on how to get the Triforce in Ocarina of Time. And occasionally, they even appeared in gaming magazines. One gaming magazine that was prominently well known for this was Electronic Gaming Monthly, who would put out a yearly April Fool's joke via a fake gaming rumor. They were also the same guys who made the whole Shenlong rumor back then for Street Fighter 2. And GoldenEye 64 was the topic of their April Fool's joke in 1998, where they showed an edited screenshot that let you not just play as the titular character Pierce Brosnan, but also as other major Bond actors too. It was as such titled as All Bonds Mode. Stories revolved around this being everything from Rareware's original plans to include other Bond characters to play as, to even being unlocked via a cheat code in the final game. The so-called official way that EGM published followed a very convoluted method that required you to play the Aztec level on 00's difficulty, set enemy health to -200, enemy damage to 100, enemy accuracy to 100, and enemy reaction speed to 100, while beating the level in only 9 minutes to unlock it. This was already a very tough level, and doing all that would be ludicrous, which may be why EGM tried to make it look obviously fake, despite many still falling for it. But regardless of it being a hoax back then, there may have been some legitimacy to it. From an old 2020 interview to data mining the game, today on Cut Content, we shall explore the mystery of All Bonds Mode in GoldenEye 64. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the subscribe button and hit the like button too to further support us and keep creating new videos. In 2020, The Independent had an interview with Rareware developers Martin Hollis and David Doak. One major factor that came up was All Bonds Mode in the game's development, whereby they stated that they were told that they initially had the license to the entire 007 franchise, which theoretically should give them access to all previous actors' likeness as well, but this was more of a gray zone. Lawyers back at Rare had warned them of this, and how the actor's likelihood could be argued as not counting as part of the Bond license. But following that interview, David Doak held a press speech discussing the game's development, which included All Bonds Mode, and stated because of how the game was to have a multiplayer mode, it would be quite obvious to want to also have all the Bonds there too. As Doak would put it,
that's what you want, because I might think Roger Moore is the best Bond, you might think it's Sean Connery, somebody might think it's Dalton, somebody might think it's the new boy, as he was then, Brosnan, and you could play deathmatch, and you could sort it out.
And while all 4 of them were playable, the license holder MGM came to them and said that they had to remove it, as Sean Connery would probably want royalties, which then would lead to other Bond actors wanting some of the cut too, leading to the team playing them one last night with over 100 death matches before being removed. So with that, are there any remnants of this even left in the game? And yes, a lot actually. First off, 3 additional Bond characters have their portraits in the data, all meant to appear in the multiplayer character select screen, something you can still add via GameShark code, but it doesn't actually let you play as them, and only replaces the portraits of Natalia, Trevelyan, and Xenia. But that isn't all that exists in the data. Further are textures for all 3 of the additional Bonds. While Brosnan's model did use a digitized low-res texture over his model to get a pretty good image of him, so did the other 3 have this feature, including Sean Connery, Timothy Dalton, Roger Moore, as it should have been. No George Lazenby. Apologies to all 5 fans of Lazenby. But this even went as far as to include each of their iconic suits too. This meant that Connery even came with his iconic white jacket with a rose corsage from Goldfinger. But wait, we didn't even need to go that far. If you open up GoldenEye 64's manual to page 20 and look underneath the multiplayer section, notice this screenshot featuring a guy with a white jacket sporting a rose corsage? Yep, this is indeed an old beta screenshot of All Bonds Mode in full effect that happened to stay left over in the game's manual. In fact, this could very well be what influenced EGM magazine to sport that April Fool's prank by simply seeing this. That's all good and well, but But is multiplayer all they were assigned to? Well, let's consider the bonus levels of this game. The two levels are the Aztec level, based on the film Moonraker, and the Egypt level, based on The Spy Who Loved Me. The two levels are odd on their own, as they have nothing to do with Brosnan, and were actually Roger Moore Bond films. Yet what we have in the final game are Brosnan being played in those very levels. Was this always the intention? This I doubt. First off, there is an unused code in the data for the ability to change your Bond actor on the single player file select screen. This may indicate that the intention may have been to play with the other Bonds in single player mode too. And going back to Doak's interview, his favorite Bond may have been Roger Moore, which might be a bit of favoritism on why only these levels of his films were made. But if they were so adamant to bring these additional Bonds into single player mode too, it would make sense to swap Brosnan's model with the Roger Moore one for these levels. Maybe to even select Moore's levels, you'd have to swap to him in the first place for them to pop up. But what about the other two? You'd think at least Sean Connery would get something. Well, it is quite possible that either A, they were indeed planning to make more levels for both Connery and Dalton, but never got to it once the plug was pulled, or B, they really did only care about Moore in the end. Either ways, with how much leftover beta properties there are for levels, it's possible they had at one point tried to even do this. However, the tale doesn't end on a complete tragedy here today, as fans took these very textures and rebuilt them into their own proper characters to be used within a mod of Perfect Dark called Goldeneye X. All Bonds mode lives. They even made a custom one for George Lazenby, literally the most complete version yet in other words, and All Bonds mode plus if anything. Even Rare themselves didn't want this to completely die, as in Perfect Dark, which many describe as the spiritual sequel to GoldenEye 64, had 4 characters in its multiplayer mode that looked eerily like the 4 that would be in All Bonds mode, down to even the white jacket with a rose corsage. This was the most official way to play All Bonds mode for a while, and GoldenEye 64 is a game with numerous amounts of cut content and history around its development, whether it be with the many lost properties of his level design, cut items, and cut characters, all of which I plan to cover soon, so hit the subscribe button for I plan to be back with more GoldenEye and other games cut content soon. Hit the like button and comment below on if you believe the old All Bonds mode hoax back then. So everyone, thank you for watching!